Imagine you're standing at the edge of a frozen marshland just before dawn. The sky above Lelystad is heavy with fog, yet something begins to pierce the mist. Pale, translucent lights ripple silently above the reeds, pulsing like veins under skin. Not bright, not blinking, breathing. Shapes form that no eye can name, bending reality as if the sky itself were unraveling. The silence is unnatural. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Then, suddenly your flashlight dies. Your phone freezes. The lights drift closer. You're no longer alone in the dark. Don't forget to like and share this story with your friends or closest family members to help spread awareness and caution through storytelling. Now, let's continue with the story. It began on the second night of March, just days after the now infamous Medusa lights danced above Amsterdam. While the city buzzed with speculation, debate, and denial, a different kind of silence settled over Lelystad. A low fog clung to the eastern wetlands, shrouding the tall grass in a static hush. A local farmer, Martin Voss, was out early to check his irrigation lines before sunrise. As he walked the path near the edge of the Oostvaardersplassen, his dog Juno froze, ears erect, growling low. Martin had lived 53 years on that land. He had seen every kind of weather, every trick the swamp could play. But this was different. The dog whimpered, turned, and ran. Then came the lights. They hovered low, barely 5 meters above the earth. Not beams, not orbs, lattices of light, floating hexagons, slowly shifting into spirals. They weren't reflections. There was no light source to reflect. The air grew warmer around him. Not humid, but charged. Martin's smartwatch rebooted. His digital thermometer on the gate began flashing random glyphs. He stood still, entranced. For a moment, he thought he could hear something, a rhythm beneath hearing, like bass thumps from a party miles away. Except there was no party, and it wasn't sound. It was pressure in his chest, in his teeth, under his nails. Elsewhere along the rural service road, 2 teenagers returning from a late-night trip claimed their car's engine stalled near the same location. The interior lights went out. Both described seeing wavy lights in the mist, forming shapes that looked like webs floating upside down. One of them, Mira, later developed a nosebleed and described experiencing vivid dreams of being underwater, with no sensation of breathing. 3 kilometers north, at the Bird Research Institute, a team had released 12 tagged gray herons for migratory tracking. Within an hour, every one of the birds veered off course by over 30 degrees, some flying inland toward Germany instead of the North Sea. Their GPS tags logged elevation fluctuations at odd intervals, shifts that didn't match wind conditions or known flight behavior. Professor Elze Van Ridge, who led the program, reviewed the data the next morning. Something about the path curves disturbed her. They weren't chaotic. They followed arcs. Smooth, calculated arcs. But that was just the beginning. That same night, an unlisted weather balloon launched from an experimental station nearby crashed 6 kilometers off course. The onboard instrumentation recorded a 19-second burst of extreme low-frequency resonance, an audio signature that, when played back, sounded like a bone-dry hum cut with pulses. The station marked it as anomalous and archived the data. The next day, a message was quietly passed among researchers at the Institute for Atmospheric Research in De Bilt. A junior analyst, unable to shake her concern, added a small note to the internal log. It read, "Unresolved Lelystad anomaly. Local EM surge detected. No known cause." The local newspaper didn't pick it up. They were too busy covering the Medusa panic. But in Lelystad, rumors began to spread. One neighbor said their solar panels stopped reporting for hours that night. Another claimed her hearing Aid screamed with white noise until morning. Children in one neighborhood near the wetland reportedly had nightmares on the same night, many of them about floating shapes, humming air, and insects falling from the sky. Martin never went back to that part of the land. He refused to talk about it publicly. But 3 days later, he posted a photo online. It was a grainy, dark image, taken through a smudged truck window, of a pale lattice of light barely visible in the fog. No one could verify it. Most people ignored it. Some called it faked. But those who live in Lelystad know better. They still talk about that night, in hushed voices, as if afraid the marsh remembers. And every now and then, when the fog rolls in thicker than usual, they look up at the sky and wonder if the lights will return. And some of them hope they won't. By the 5th of March, the marshland remained quiet, but something had changed. In the heart of the Oostvaardersplassen Reserve, birdwatchers reported abnormal silence. The usual cacophony of gulls, herons, and geese had dwindled to a scattered few calls, like echoes lost between trees. The staff at the visitor center, used to waking to a raucous natural orchestra, found the wetlands eerily still. A maintenance ranger named Inga Rietveld was the first to notice. As she cycled the gravel path toward observation deck 9, she halted abruptly. A long, serpentine track was pressed into the frost-glazed grass. It looked as if something heavy had slithered, not rolled, not dragged, through the tall reeds. No boot marks, no tire prints, just a depressed channel that led to a shallow pool on the north end of the lake. She followed it. As she reached the edge of the water, her radio hissed. A low whine filled the headset, followed by brief silence. Then something she would later struggle to describe. Not a voice, but a pattern. Pulses. 3 short, 2 long, 3 short again. Then nothing. She switched channels. The static continued. She stared at the pool. There was something strange in the reflection. The sky above was blue and cloudless, yet the surface of the water shimmered as if refracting light from beneath. Not sunlight, not algae. It twisted unnaturally, like an oil film caught between panes of glass, slowly rotating in place. Inga stepped back. The whine in her headset spiked again. She turned off the device and hurried back toward her cycle. When she later reported the incident, she was told to submit her logs and avoid that area until surveyors could confirm ground stability. But she never saw any survey team arrive. In town, anomalies began affecting more than devices. People complained of persistent headaches, localized to the northeast quadrant of Lelystad. Pets refused to leave homes. At least 2 families claimed their cats vanished entirely after venturing toward the edge of the nature reserve. One child, 7-year-old Amira Deckers, was found sitting outside the marsh fence in the middle of the night. Her parents had put her to bed at 9. By midnight, she was over a kilometer away, barefoot and expressionless. When asked why she had gone there, she whispered a single word: listening. When prompted further, she clutched her ears and cried. A local neurologist, Dr. Willem Tulling, was called to examine her the next morning. He noted a mild tremor in her hands and observed unusual sensitivity to low-frequency sound. Using specialized headphones, he played a selection of frequencies. When he reached 42 hertz, Amira gasped and recited a number: 3260117. No one had taught her those digits. They meant nothing to her parents, nor to Dr. Tulling. But 2 weeks later, a technician at a Dutch research station ran a cross-reference. The number matched part of a legacy serial code assigned to a defunct military transmitter decommissioned in 1992. Its last known location? Just outside Lelystad. No records existed of why it had been built there. Meanwhile, Professor Elze Van Ridge continued to analyze the heron migration logs. She began to overlay the altered flight paths onto a topographic heat map of the region. What she discovered chilled her. The birds had not flown off course randomly. They had circled something. In the center of their altered trajectories was a dry patch of marsh, shaped like an eye, measuring precisely 400 meters across. She mapped it again, this time with satellite overlays. Nothing appeared, but when she reviewed footage from a thermal drone sweep, recorded just days before the anomaly, the area pulsed with heat, despite being surrounded by frozen ground. The professor took this data to the institute. They told her it was an imaging error, a corrupted frame. She tried again. The second scan was clean. No heat, no shape, as if it had never been there. She was warned not to raise alarm unnecessarily. But something inside her refused to rest. She requested historical aerial data from the National Archive. After sifting through dozens of flight photos spanning 30 years, she found only one with a faint irregularity in the same spot. It was taken in 1988, and in the margin someone had scribbled in faded red pen, "Unnatural symmetry, check ground depth." No follow-up data was found. That night, Elze printed out the image and pinned it above her desk. Then she unplugged her institute laptop and locked it in a drawer. She turned off the lights, and still, her room didn't feel empty. As tension grew beneath the surface of Lelystad's routine life, the municipality remained silent. Officials claimed power outages were due to grid instability. Wildlife shifts were blamed on a delayed seasonal bloom. But among the few who were watching, a new phrase began to circulate in hushed conversations. "It's not what we saw, it's what we didn't." And in the reeds, the wind stopped blowing. By the 7th of March, Lelystad had changed, subtly but unmistakably. The streets were quieter, the local forums full of speculation. Something hovered just beyond the edge of daily life, like static on the edge of hearing. Most dismissed it as leftover paranoia from the Medusa panic sweeping the nation. But others, those who lived near the Eastern Marsh, knew better. That morning, Thomas DeWitt, a local drone hobbyist and retired electrical engineer, reviewed his aerial footage from the night before. He had sent up his quadcopter shortly after midnight, just above the tree line on the eastern bank of the reserve. What he found in the footage was not spectacular, but it was wrong. Frames from the 30-minute video were missing. Not glitched, not corrupted, simply gone. Entire seconds, cleanly cut. Time stamps skipped forward in perfect 5-second increments, 6 times across the recording. The audio track remained intact, but the video stream sliced itself like something deliberate had bypassed the hardware altogether. He replayed the segment where the gaps occurred. The missing visuals were centered above the same dry patch of marsh Elze Van Ridge had identified, the symmetrical area the herons had circled. Thomas, not one to jump to conclusions, performed a firmware diagnostic. Nothing. His system logs were clean. It was as if the drone had obeyed a command he never gave. He tried to post a clip online. Within minutes, his upload failed, citing a checksum conflict. He tried again using a different service. That post was removed within the hour for violating data integrity protocols. He disconnected the internet. He printed still frames instead, frames showing subtle distortions just before the cuts, waves across the horizon, like heat off asphalt but moving sideways, unnatural shearing, compression where there should have been clean sky. He brought the prints to the local constabulary. The officer at the desk, barely 23, gave them a cursory glance and laughed. Thomas left the station. His house lost power that night. At the northern edge of the reserve, the small village of Swifterbent began to experience livestock irregularities. A goat was found stiff, facing the marsh with both eyes clouded white. A farmer discovered a pattern of burnt grass in a near-perfect crescent shape behind his barn. No scorch marks, no tracks. The grass was simply dead. A vet from Lelystad examined the goat. No signs of illness, no trauma. Yet the heart had stopped mid-beat, with all biological systems intact, something the pathologist later referred to as an interruption without cause. He didn't file the report officially. He never explained why. Children in Swifterbent began drawing strange things. Spirals with eyes, trees with no roots. In one sketch, a large oval object floated above stick figures, each one holding its head in pain. A teacher named Endegroff collected the drawings and quietly sent them to the municipality's child psychology office. No one responded. Meanwhile, Professor Elze Van Ridge received an anonymous package at her university office in Utrecht. Inside were three things: a heavily redacted military document titled Contingency 326-0117, Observation Protocol North Flevoland, a single compact disc labeled Station L12, Final Broadcast, March 1988, and a handwritten note on aged, folded graph paper. They built something, then they buried it. Now it's waking up. She read the document first. What little was visible spoke of an experimental transmission array installed under classified directives during the late Cold War. No reason given, only the coordinates, exactly where the marsh now lies. One paragraph, barely legible through the black marker, noted a long-duration harmonic probe and environmental induction test. Then she played the disc. The audio began with static, followed by faint thudding. Not mechanical, not natural, like pressure, like something hitting from deep underground. Then came the pulse, a low tone, oscillating slowly, rising in frequency, steady and endless. But at minute 4, a shift occurred. The tone glitched. It fractured. A whisper emerged underneath. Not words, not language, but something vocal, breathing, pacing, waiting. Then silence. She pulled the disc out with trembling hands. In the marsh, rangers began to report power fluctuations in their flashlights. Batteries drained within minutes. Radios became unreliable. Equipment left near the eastern basin would mysteriously fail diagnostics the next day. The park was closed to the public for seasonal preservation, but the fog never lifted, and though the officials declared the nature reserve undisturbed, a new detail emerged in satellite readings: a circular heat bloom, invisible to the eye, visible only in infrared. It expanded by 1 meter every 12 hours, centered on the symmetrical marsh. They didn't give it a name, but those who watched it called it the perimeter, and the perimeter was growing. By the 9th of March, the perimeter had reached a full half-kilometer in radius. It advanced with such mathematical precision that even skeptics began to take notice. Not through headlines, there were none, but through whispers, locked forums, and encrypted emails between curious minds. It was during this time that a freelance radio technician named Levi Van Hagen picked up something he couldn't explain. Levi was known among the community for his obsession with shortwave listening. He maintained a towering array of antennas from the attic of his farmhouse, nestled between Lelystad and Dronten. That night, while scanning for maritime signals, he caught a repeating transmission on a frequency no station should be using: 91.15 megahertz. It came in slow pulses: 6 beats pause, 5 pause, 7 long pause, then 3, a loop. But what disturbed Levi wasn't the pattern. It was the sound between them. Each pause was filled with a dense static hiss, except the hiss had structure. Within it were harmonics, peaks and valleys that formed sharp, sudden spikes. He ran a fast Fourier transform on the signal. What appeared were spectral shapes resembling something not seen in natural audio, waveforms folding in on themselves. One of them even matched an old sonar-returned signature Levi had seen during his time in the Navy, specifically from deep-sea subduction zones. Only this was coming from inland. He boosted the gain and layered the sample into stereo. The result was haunting. Beneath the static, you could hear breathing, deep, slow, and wet, and then a sharp click, not mechanical, organic, like cartilage snapping into place. Levi recorded the entire session, timestamped it, and uploaded a log to an encrypted server he shared with a small group of fellow radio hobbyists. Only 3 people ever viewed it. 2 responded with simple text: received. The 3rd disappeared from the group chat entirely. In a building no longer listed on digital maps, several kilometers outside Lelystad, a meeting took place. For men, 1 woman. No uniforms. Just cold expressions and tired eyes. They spoke in clipped Dutch. The subject was simple. The signal is back. They referenced something called Project Strumline, initiated in 1987, shut down in 1992, or at least officially. The project's aim had been the study of non-terrestrial harmonic interference, a euphemism many believed for covert communication with something not man-made. The meeting concluded without resolution, but one directive was clear. We contain it this time. Meanwhile, Professor Elze Van Ridge met with Thomas DeWitt in secret. The drone footage, printed and spread across a cafe table under the cover of night, aligned too perfectly with her thermal data. Every missing frame, every heat ripple, every shadow that didn't behave like a shadow. Thomas said little, only adding one detail. Something scrambled the camera before it passed overhead. He showed her the signal readouts. The gyroscope spiked just before each visual cut. Electromagnetic feedback like that didn't come from solar flare or interference. It was more like a command, one the drone had obeyed as if from a control tower that didn't exist. They agreed to meet again. 2 days later, Thomas vanished from his home. His phone pinged once, briefly, from the edge of the marsh. Then it went dark. The authorities found no trace. In the village of Swifterbent, the livestock deaths continued. This time, a horse collapsed without signs of illness. Its eyes rolled white. Its ears bled. The vet refused to issue a cause of death. Instead, she left town the next day. People began reporting light dreams, floating dreams, where they rose from their beds and drifted through dark tunnels. Some woke with bruises on their necks, faint red rings on their arms as if marked. One woman described a hallway that pulsed with blue veins, where she walked barefoot past windows that showed an ocean with no end. But she was underground. When she woke, she vomited seawater. Lab analysis later confirmed a salinity ratio impossible to find in Dutch coastal waters. Then, late on the night of March 10th, the perimeter emitted sound. Residents on the east side of Lelystad reported hearing a deep humming, like a ship engine reverberating through their floors. The sound only lasted 7 minutes, but it cracked glass, set off car alarms, drove dogs into howling fits. The municipality issued a notice attributing it to low-frequency Earth resonance due to frost shift. No frost was recorded that night. The next morning, a pattern appeared in the field. A perfect arc carved into the wet soil, stretching over 100 meters. Satellite footage reviewed later showed that the arc had grown outward in real time, not been formed by movement on the ground. Something had pushed up, not pressed down. And in the center of the arc, reeds stood taller, straighter, as if nourished by something ancient, something not dead. The 11th of March began with a clear sky, but by midday a low ceiling of cloud rolled in from the northeast. It wasn't forecast. It moved too slow. Satellite data would later show the cloud bank forming in a way that didn't match any known pressure system, like it had been summoned. At 3:42 p.m., a strange resonance was detected across Lelystad's power grid. The signal wasn't just electrical. It had frequency of pattern. 3 pulses, then 5, then a long tone that faded into silence. The lights in a dozen homes dimmed simultaneously. Smart thermostats froze at 22 degrees. Smartphones lost signal for precisely 97 seconds, then reconnected, all set to the wrong time, 17 minutes ahead. That evening, a physics lecturer from Wageningen University, Dr. Noor Brandsma, was reviewing her off-grid energy module data. Her station, set up east of Dronten, was unaffected by the municipal grid, and yet her solar monitoring logs showed the same anomalies. The signal had reached even isolated circuits. She called her colleague, a geophysicist stationed near Urk. His response was brief. It's not coming from the sky. It's coming from below it. That night, people across the eastern half of Flevoland witnessed the sky behave incorrectly. Above the marsh, beneath the low clouds, something moved. It wasn't light. It wasn't metal. It was shadow against vapor. A shifting bulge like a dome pushing upward through fog, warping its edges. Some described it as a jellyfish, black and vast, trailing threads of condensation like silk ribbons that never fell. It hovered without motion, without sound. Then it retracted, folding into itself like lungs exhaling. Within moments, the clouds sealed shut. The footage that emerged was scarce. Phones captured only haze and darkness. One video taken from a cyclist's helmet cam showed a brief outline. Circular, ridged, translucent, before the footage broke into static. What remained consistent across all accounts was what came after. The sound. At exactly 9:08 p.m., a tone began across Lelystad. It wasn't heard with ears. It was felt. People dropped to their knees in shops, in kitchens and fields. Some held their heads. Others trembled violently. Blood vessels burst in the eyes of at least 9 individuals. Dogs howled and vomited. A priest leading evening prayers at a small church collapsed mid-sermon, whispering, "They're reaching." Hospital emergency rooms overflowed with patients reporting migraines, vertigo, and tactile hallucinations. One man claimed he felt his bones vibrating like tuning forks. Those with pacemakers felt intense pressure in their chests. One patient claimed their heartbeat matched the tone's pulse. No recording devices captured it directly. Audio logs showed silence, but equipment monitoring vibration recorded a low, recursive thrum, steady at 102.7 hertz, a frequency known to induce anxiety, spatial disorientation, and hallucination in prolonged exposure. But it had only lasted 2 minutes. Then silence, and a ring of scorched vegetation appeared at the edge of the perimeter. Elsewhere, in a retired Cold War bunker beneath the polder, a dormant monitor lit up for the first time in over 30 years. On screen, a single blinking phrase: "Inbound verification required. Level 3 echo detected. Return channel open." The modem beside it, buried under plastic and dust, clicked. Someone or something was answering. Professor Elze Van Ridge received an encrypted email that night. No sender, no subject. Inside was a spectrogram. When she processed the data, the waveform revealed a mirrored spiral, a double helix of tonal peaks. Below it, a set of coordinates: 52.5281, 5.4820. It pointed to an abandoned water control station near the marsh, one that had been closed for over a decade after a supposed electrical fire. Elze didn't wait. She packed a thermal camera, a backup battery, and a field recorder. She left her house at 11:30 p.m. She arrived just after midnight. The sky above the station was black, cloudless, and too quiet. Even the insects were absent. The old building loomed ahead, its windows shattered, its gate long rusted open. She stepped inside. The air was dry. Dust hung motionless. Her boots echoed in strange ways. Some steps rang out longer than others, like sound took longer to hit certain walls. She reached the central chamber, where the old control consoles still stood, disconnected, broken, covered in spider webs. And yet, one display blinked red. A small screen in the far right corner, partially melted, showed a flickering waveform. The same tone, the same spiral. Elze raised her thermal camera. The screen was cold, but the floor beneath it pulsed with heat. She stepped back. Then she heard it, not in her ears, but in her chest. A single beat, low, alive, and something behind the wall, metal or bone or neither, shifted. Elze stood frozen. The air inside the abandoned water control station had changed. Not in temperature, in weight. It felt heavy, like atmosphere pressing down from every angle, squeezing her thoughts through a sieve. Her pulse throbbed in her ears, syncing with the soft, rhythmic vibration pulsing up through her boots. She didn't want to move forward. But something inside her, maybe curiosity, maybe compulsion, pulled her deeper. She approached the blinking console, its cracked frame flickering erratically. The waveform on the screen began to loop in irregular intervals, not just spiraling, but stretching, growing longer. The thermal camera in her hand started to glitch. Instead of displaying gradations of temperature, it drew strange patterns, intersecting lines and arcs that shimmered with false motion. Suddenly, a mechanical clack echoed through the concrete space. A door behind her, one she hadn't entered through, slid open. No creak, no groan, just a cold, perfect motion. Beyond it was a stairwell leading down. Not wanting to be trapped, Elze wedged the door open with a broken pipe and began her descent. The staircase curved unnaturally, not in a spiral, but in a sloping arc that seemed too tight for the physical dimensions of the building. She felt disoriented, as if gravity itself was shifting with each step. At the bottom, she found a hall. The corridor was lined with panels, wires long stripped or melted. Emergency signs in faded red still marked directions in Dutch. Generatorwimt, Controlkamer, Testgebied. The test area was locked behind a rusted blast door. Thick, reinforced steel that bore deep claw-like gouges, though from what kind of tool or creature, she couldn't begin to guess. But the control room to the left was wide open. Inside, the air was stale. A thick layer of dust coated every surface. Yet in the middle of the room, a single monitor glowed softly. It displayed a live feed, not from a camera above, but from beneath the marsh. Black water, faint blue bioluminescent streaks, particles rising slowly as if something below stirred them gently. Then movement. A shape passed across the feed, tentacled but not jellyfish, too angular, segmented. It drifted for a moment, then vanished into the dark. Beneath the video was a timestamp. It was dated that very night, precisely 3 minutes in the future. Elze checked her watch. The times matched. The feed was playing ahead of real time. Then the screen changed. A new line appeared. Echo confirmed. Sequence activating. A soft alarm began to sound. The lights overhead flickered. One by one, banks of red lights lined along the hallway began turning on. She grabbed her bag and ran. On the surface, the marsh began to change. Birds took flight in chaotic waves. Herds of deer fled the tree line. Even the insects vanished, their silence creating a vacuum of sound. At the center of the perimeter, the ground began to shift, subtly but steadily. From above, satellite feeds recorded the Earth forming a shallow spiral trench exactly 400 meters wide, its arms etched with mathematical precision. A pattern known in theoretical math as an involute, the same one used to model resonance collapse in harmonic field theory, which meant something was not collapsing. It was coalescing. Back in town, Levi Van Hagen reconnected his receivers. The frequency had changed. No longer pulses, but a voice. He recorded it. Slow, modulated, faintly aquatic. Not Dutch, not English, but rhythmic. A linguist later compared the recording to ancient Proto-Sumerian phonemes and deep-sea whale communication patterns. The voice repeated the same sequence 3 times. Then silence. Then a second signal. A deeper tone, constant and unyielding. It caused audio devices to overload. Speakers melted. Magnetic drives warped. The tone didn't just play. It pressed. And beneath its pressure, data broke. Digital files corrupted. Servers blinked out. In one strange case, a backup drive reformatted itself, its label rewritten in gibberish symbols resembling cuneiform. When decoded via frequency analysis, the pattern formed a single word, rendered in visual echo. Return. Elze emerged from the station just after 3 a.m. The marsh was glowing. Not with light, with colorless motion. The reeds bent and undulated without wind. The mist curled in geometric loops. Above it, The clouds pulsed with a hidden rhythm. She turned to leave, but her phone vibrated in her pocket. No service, no signal, yet a message blinked on screen. No app opened it. No source listed it. Just a single sentence. "You are a receiver now." And as she looked up, the marsh opened. The earth did not split. It unfurled. Before Elze's eyes, the center of the marshland, once thick with reeds and still water, peeled back like the skin of a fruit. Layers of soil bent upward in petal-like segments, each folding with unnatural smoothness, revealing a perfect spiral trench beneath. The spiral pulsed with a faint inner glow, colorless yet visible, like heat shimmering across ice. The trench wasn't made of dirt. Not anymore. Its interior was lined with smooth, blackened stone, or something resembling stone. But it responded to the mist around it. Vapor curled and slid across its surface like liquid obeying command. At the spiral's core sat a circular depression, just wide enough to hold a human body. Empty. Waiting. Elze backed away slowly, breath shallow. The tone in her skull had returned. Faint, constant. Not noise. A presence. Like something massive watching her from just beneath the surface. Not with eyes. With intent. She turned to run, but her legs failed. Her body crumpled to the cold grass. Not from fear. From resonance. Muscles twitched. Her vision blurred at the edges. She tried to scream, but only a breathless gasp escaped. Then, through the mist, a figure approached. It wasn't walking. It glided, its feet never touching the ground. Human in shape but hollowed, as if it had been stretched through time. A silhouette of soft black with faint internal light pulsing like veins beneath skin. It reached her and paused. Elze's mind flooded, not with words, but with sensation. Images. Not memories. Warnings. The spiral. The water. The sound. A time before people walked these lands. Before land itself. A creature. No, a construct. Or both. Not from space. Not from the sea. From before both. From the silence that preceded division. From the breach between frequency and matter. Something built to contain, then forgotten, now remembered. She blinked, and the figure was gone. Her body relaxed. The tone stopped. The mist receded. The marsh was unchanged. But she was not. Across Lelystad, others experienced it too. People awoke with blank stares and whispered things in languages they did not speak. A man in his 70s collapsed in his greenhouse, mumbling sequences of numbers later identified as precise frequency values used in sonar arrays. A woman dreamed of standing in a white corridor beneath the earth where walls breathed and light bled. She awoke with blood on her palms and no wounds to explain it. At a primary school, 10 children drew identical symbols with black crayons. Swirls nested inside triangles. Curved glyphs. One child scrawled over and over in shaking handwriting. It is not new. It was waiting. The teacher burned the drawings. By midday, national military personnel quietly entered Lelystad under the guise of infrastructure inspection. No uniforms. Unmarked vans. They established perimeters under the pretense of seismic risk mitigation. They carried instruments designed not for measuring tremors, but sound. Deep sound. 2 officers stationed near the marsh's edge reported losing contact for 7 minutes. When retrieved, they stood motionless, eyes wide as if freshly drowned. Neither man recalled entering the field. One whispered a single sentence before collapsing. "It remembers me." Professor Elze returned home to find her house had been entered. Nothing was taken, nothing broken, but every document, every diagram, every photograph relating to her research had been neatly removed. Her desk drawer, where she had locked the 1988 spectrogram, now held only a blank sheet of paper. Except when she turned it under light, faint impressions revealed the spectrogram's spiral, burned into the paper as if the ink had never touched it, only remembered it. She tried to call a colleague in Utrecht. The line connected. A voice answered, not her colleague's. Receiver confirmed, it said, and hung up. In Swifterbent, that evening, someone saw the marsh lights again. But this time, they weren't hovering above. They were rising from below. Dozens of pale tendrils, like translucent cords, shimmered upward from the spiral center. They floated toward the sky, writhing as if searching. One by one, they vanished into the mist. No one approached the field, but satellite imaging picked up a sudden temperature spike, then a void. A cold patch, so absolute it erased signal. An analyst flagged the anomaly and labeled it sensor error. But the void didn't disappear. It moved. March 12th dawned gray and slow. The usual morning sounds, sparrows on rooftops, the distant roll of commuter traffic, were strangely dulled, as if someone had draped a wet cloth over the world. But in the far eastern fields beyond Lelystad, something had changed overnight. Where once was marsh, there was now a void. Not a hole, not destruction. The terrain remained. Grass swayed. Mud clung to boots. But perception itself faltered. The eye couldn't hold it. People described it as missing pieces of sight. Looking at it was like forgetting what one was looking at, like staring into the blind spot of the world. Others described it as light slipping sideways. Sound died near its edges. Even the breeze went silent, like air refused to pass through. Farmers reported animals refusing to approach. Birds that veered sharply mid-flight. Drone pilots attempting to fly overhead found their crafts unresponsive, their GPS routes overwritten by coordinates that did not exist. Levi Van Hagen, restless after 2 days of silence from his encrypted channel, did something reckless. He packed his portable signal scope, set it to monitor frequency ranges from 8 Hz to 60 kHz, and walked straight toward the void's edge. He passed 2 unmanned military sensors, short towers blinking with slow green lights. No alarms went off. No personnel stopped him. At precisely 83 meters from the spiral center, Levi's equipment froze. The display filled with cascading code, symbols from no known operating system. His headset filled with the soft rush of wind, though none stirred around him. And then came the voice again. This time it was clearer. "You are built from resonance," it said. Not in Dutch, not any language, but Levi understood it. "Your world is tuned. Yours is not the first." He felt pressure behind his eyes, not pain, density, then a silence deeper than any he had ever known. His scope display blinked once. Coordinates appeared. He memorized them before the battery melted in his hand. Later that night, Elze deciphered the location. The coordinates pointed to a spot just offshore from the Lelystad coastline. A structure built in the 70s, a platform used for freshwater regulation. Decommissioned in 2004, records claimed it had been dismantled, but the satellite images told a different story. The platform still stood, partially submerged, rotting steel girders jutting from the IJsselmeer like bones, and on its surface, barely visible, was a pattern, a spiral etched into rusted metal. At 2:07 a.m., the void moved. Not rolled, not crawled. It shifted. Sensors placed across the marsh registered a 15-meter southward drift in under 10 seconds. Witnesses described the movement as a wave of forgetting. One man, walking his dog along a distant farm track, claimed he saw a large shadow pass behind a row of trees. No footsteps, no rustle, just leaves curling inward, like shying from something enormous. His dog ran. He stood still for 30 minutes. Later, he couldn't remember why. When he looked at his phone, it had recorded a voice memo while in his pocket. The file was 33 seconds of low-frequency vibration and whisper-like distortion. But at the end came a phrase, intelligible only when slowed to half speed. "You brought us back." By sunrise, the pattern began to repeat. Every 4 hours, the void shifted. It didn't follow roads or waterways. It followed something else, lines invisible to human eyes. Ley lines, some suggested. Resonance channels, others theorized. Regardless, wherever the void moved, the ground pulsed. Not visibly, not violently, but instruments registered changes. Soil temperature dropped by 6 degrees. Plant roots wilted. Nearby water sources grew acidic for minutes, then returned to normal. But none of it lingered. It passed like a shadow, but left something behind. Children in the town began to hum. A single tone, unprompted, without words. No melody, just tone. They weren't aware they were doing it. When parents asked, the children would stop, blink, then hum again later. Recordings of the hum, played backward, revealed a near match to the March 10th signal, only reversed. Not coincidence. Echo. Elze and Levi met at the harbor that night. She brought the drone footage. He brought the melted scope casing and his hand, now blistered, red-veined like a branch system under his skin. They argued. Elze wanted to return to the offshore platform. She believed it was the anchor point, maybe even the origin. Levi disagreed. He believed the spiral beneath the marsh was the entity, that the platform was merely an antenna calling the body closer. Elze, he said, we're not watching it arrive. We're watching it awaken. A gust of wind passed through the harbor. The boats didn't rock, but the masts all shivered in unison. At 4 a.m., the void reached the outskirts of Lelystad proper. Streetlights dimmed. Phones lost signal. Sleepers across the town stirred restlessly, their dreams now synchronizing into one shared vision. The corridor, the breathing walls, the pulsing spiral, and something at the end of the hallway, just beyond perception, a shape waiting to be seen. When the void brushed the eastern edge of Lelystad, the town exhaled, not from relief, from intrusion. Every sleeping mind within the affected radius found itself walking the same path, an impossibly long hallway of bone-white walls, smooth as polished stone, lit by no visible source. A soft, colorless glow lined the corridor's center, like a spinal cord made of light. Some moved alone. Others passed familiar faces, but no one spoke. They couldn't. Their mouths did not open. Their bodies felt neither light nor heavy. They were not floating, but they didn't walk. They were carried. At the end of the corridor stood a door, not a barrier of wood or steel, but a shifting curtain of geometry, alive with symbols no one could comprehend. It pulsed in time with their heartbeats. Behind it, something vast stirred, something that wanted to see. Those who reached the door awoke with blood on their pillowcases, ears, noses, eyes. Many had seizures within minutes. Others simply collapsed. Hospitals filled again. Doctors labeled it mass psychogenic illness. But the test results said otherwise. Elevated electromagnetic readings in the skull. Surge like imprints in the hippocampus. Memory loops. Trauma markers, as if the patients had lived through something together. Meanwhile, Elze and Levi launched a stolen research drone toward the offshore platform. The platform had no listed access points. It was believed to be unsafe for physical landing. But they didn't need to land. They needed eyes. The drone hovered above the rusted steel frame, its camera panning slowly. At first, nothing unusual. Then, on infrared, movement. The spiral burned hot beneath layers of corroded decking. Its arms writhed slowly, not carved, grown, like a fungus stretching outward. When the drone's mic engaged, the speaker picked up a familiar hum. Faint, yes, but identical to the children's tone. The same frequency, the same pulse, and then the spiral responded. It moved, like a clock gear resetting. One segment realigned itself by exactly 6 degrees. A signal followed, but it wasn't sound. It was time. The drone's system clock jumped forward 38 seconds. All onboard instruments reset. Its altitude reading spiked, then dropped. On screen, a shape emerged beneath the water surrounding the platform. Wide, circular, semi-transparent. watching. The drone feed cut to static. That same hour, deep beneath the marshland spiral, sensors began to fail. Not from overload, from confusion. Devices reported location data that placed them kilometers beneath sea level, impossible readings. Atmospheric pressure inside sealed, containers dropped inexplicably. One device claimed it was floating, despite being buried under 3 feet of solid earth. A team monitoring from a covert bunker lost all readings simultaneously. Then, one camera lit up again. A single frame flashed across the screen. It showed a figure, tall, featureless, reflective, standing at the center of the spiral, facing the camera. Then the feed died permanently. Levi began to sleepwalk. At first, just a few steps out of bed, then through the house, then out into the street. Each time he was found staring east. Always east, toward the marsh. When Elze confronted him, he had no memory. But when she recorded him one night, his sleepwalking self spoke a phrase. They gave us shape, then left us hollow. He stopped walking after that, but he didn't sleep anymore. The dreams spread west. Residents in Almere and even Amsterdam began reporting similar symptoms, shared hallucinations, phantom tones, and corridor visions. Psychologists called it narrative contagion. Physicists disagreed. One scientist, a fringe signal theorist named Dr. Fennecorthuis, published a paper before being suspended. Her theory, the corridor was not a dream. It was a memory, etched into the fabric of Earth's resonance layer, a backup system, replaying for those sensitive enough to receive it. She titled the paper, The Memory of the Spiral. Within 24 hours, it was removed from every journal archive. By March 13th, a decision was made. At 3 a.m., 3 military helicopters approached the marsh perimeter. No warning, no spotlight, silent entry. Locals reported only a low hum preceding the blackout. Then came the light, not a flash, a bloom. Pale, luminous fog rose like smoke from the spiral, swallowing the field and the helicopters both. No impact sounds, no explosions, no return. At sunrise, the only sign of their presence was a deep, glass-smooth depression at the spiral's core. And something else. A new ring had formed, wider, deeper. It glowed faintly in the daylight. The spiral had grown. At first, it was only the scientists who noticed. In the hours following the failed military incursion, seismographs from Lelystad to as far as Groningen picked up an ultra-low frequency pulse. It wasn't seismic, not a tremor, not tectonic motion. It behaved like a breath. Slow, rhythmic. Every 47 minutes, the same pattern emerged. Rising pressure, stillness, then a drop. It was as if something beneath the country had begun to inhale. By the afternoon of March 13th, devices worldwide began to blink in strange unison. Clocks adjusted themselves by fractions of a second. GPS markers in South Korea, Argentina, and Iceland showed momentary errors, all traced back to the same offset. 52.5281 north, 5.4820 east. The spiral, no longer local, no longer sleeping. The broadcast had begun. Elze knew they had lost control. She stood at the highest point in Lelystad, a water tower turned observation deck. From there, she could see the faint shimmer that hung over the marsh like heat waves. Beneath it, the spiral was no longer just a formation. It was structure. It housed something, and now it seemed it was speaking, or reaching. From her coat pocket, she retrieved a strange object Levi had found the previous night. It hadn't been there before. It simply sat on the porch of his house like a forgotten tool, black and smooth, shaped like a stone, but etched with markings that pulsed faintly when touched. The pulse matched the dreams, the rhythm, the hum. When she placed it near her phone, the device flickered. Its signal bars twisted into glyphs. She activated a recording app. Nothing but static, until she held the object in her palm. Then voice. Spiral receives. Spiral remembers. Spiral reshapes. The message repeated once. Then the phone died completely. Meanwhile, authorities blocked off all access to the marsh. A no-fly zone was declared. Checkpoints appeared. Roads redirected. But the perimeter did not obey barriers. It began to spread with geometric precision, an expanding radius of interference. Devices failed. Power grids sputtered. Water in nearby homes began to taste metallic. Glass would hum at odd hours of the night. Static crept across televisions not plugged in. Within 36 hours, the spiral had tripled in size, and something began to grow inside it. Those who lived closest reported new patterns. Shadows seen moving against the grain of light. Trees leaning away from the spiral center. Dead animals found with no wounds, only circular burns on their chests, each exactly 12 centimeters wide. A wildlife officer found one such animal, a fox, eyes glazed, teeth bared, but the inside of its skull completely smooth. No brain, no blood, yet no trauma, almost as if something had taken what it needed without breaking the vessel. At 9:16 p.m., a new tone entered the air. This time it could be recorded. Broadcasters across Europe caught it, a high-pitched harmonic that entered regular TV and radio transmissions. It came without warning, lasted 10 seconds, then silence. Experts said it wasn't possible. The tone bypassed encryption, private networks, even satellite feeds. An emergency frequency in Berlin was hijacked to play the sound. Surveillance footage showed technicians frozen in place as it played, one with tears running silently down her face, another mouthing the same word over and over. Rewrite. After the tone stopped, 12 people across 4 cities were hospitalized for what doctors described as temporal vertigo. They believed they were living in the wrong time. They described moments repeating themselves out of order. One man remembered his own death in a hallway of white stone. Another woman claimed she was no longer bound by linear sound. Levi isolated the tone into wave segments. When visualized, the peaks mapped out an image, a spiral, but deeper than that movement, a second layer moving beneath the spiral, like a second voice beneath a whisper. The movement formed a pattern resembling ancient sonar pings, but spaced irregularly, like a message stuttering to form a language. Levi called Elze. "They're not just signaling," he said. "They're scanning." Later that night, she returned to the marsh's edge, against all warnings. She held the black object in her palm and stepped past the barricade. The soldiers didn't stop her. They simply stared. As she approached the spiral, her body began to vibrate, not from cold, from resonance. Each step seemed to sink with a deeper rhythm beneath the ground. Then, at the edge of the spiral, the air thinned. Her vision blurred, and then suddenly clarified. What she saw wasn't what the world saw. To others, the spiral was a pit in the marsh, a disturbance, a field of cracked earth. But to her it was a doorway, rising upward from the trench. Glowing faintly was a structure no human hand had built. Smooth walls curved in concentric arcs, like the inside of a nautilus. Floating symbols hovered midair, flickering in and out of view. And in the center, a single column of light. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and as she stepped toward it, she heard a voice. Not outside her, inside. "You are still clay. We are still fire." Then the light flared, and the world blinked. The spiral's column of light swallowed Elze without pain, without sound. To any observer, she simply vanished, consumed by the shimmer at the center of the marsh. No flash, no ripple, just the absence of her form, replaced by a thin ring of mist that rose and hung in the air for several seconds before fading into nothing. But Elze didn't die. She descended. There was no sensation of falling, no gravity to pull against. Just motion, smooth, quiet, fluid, as if the world had changed its axis and she was being drawn along a river without water. Then light returned. It was not sunlight. It came from the walls. She stood in a space both massive and enclosed, impossible in its scale. Arched corridors stretched outward in all directions, their surfaces etched with moving symbols, shifting across their surfaces like skin under breath. There was no wind, no hum, but the air was alive. She moved, slowly, heart racing, but not from fear, from recognition. The architecture around her made no sense, yet it felt familiar. Every curve, every intersection of line and shadow triggered something within her, a memory that wasn't hers. As she stepped forward, the light pulsed. Once, twice, then the floor beneath her shifted. A panel rose. Floating atop, it was a figure, not a person, not even a shape, a shimmer of space folded inward, bending light and sense into a knot of impossible geometry. And within it, eyes, dozens of them. Each blinked once, then all closed at once. Then came the voice, not from the air, but from the structure itself. You returned the code. Now we write. Elze tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't carry. The shimmer pulsed. Clay was given breath. Breath was given thought. Thought was given to silence. You broke the silence. She tried to understand, but what followed weren't words. They were sensations. Memories poured into her. Memories of something vast, something buried, not beneath the earth, but within it. A presence older than soil, than oceans, than memory itself. A technology of resonance. A civilization not built from tools, but from tone. Entities that lived in waveform, that breathed frequency, that grew in rhythm and decayed in dissonance. They had seeded the planet long before matter cooled. They had retreated before language, and they had waited until we began to hum again, until our machines, our signals, our broadcast towers sang their songs back into the earth. Above, in the waking world, the spiral expanded again, now visible from the outskirts of Almera. Its edges shimmered with faint distortion. Roads near began to bend as if under heat. Glass in nearby buildings began to fracture in patterns of spirals and interlocking triangles. Children across the Netherlands stopped speaking for 3 minutes. When they resumed, many began drawing shapes into the dirt, onto walls, into fogged windows. Every shape was the same, a spiral, cracked down the center, stitched with lines of light. Inside the resonance chamber beneath the marsh, Elze stepped closer to the floating shimmer. One eye opened again, and from it emerged a figure, her own, a reflection, no a variation. Same face, same hands, but eyes that glowed with faint inner light. Skin etched with the same shifting patterns on the walls. It stepped forward and reached out. "Echo complete," it whispered. Elze staggered back. "What is this?" "You are the carrier," the reflection said. "You brought the last fragment. The seed has memory, but not will. You gave it shape." Then everything froze. Not stopped, paused. A pulse passed through the chamber. An entire space glitched, briefly, as if reality blinked. And when it resumed, the spiral above erupted with sound. Not just tone, voice. The land itself vibrated with it. Buildings shook, rivers stilled, planes grounded. Satellites caught the signal and failed to interpret it. It wasn't a language. It was a reformatting, an override, a planetary handshake. And as Elze stood before her echo, both her and the reflection spoke at once. "We are not the first. We are not the only." And the ground began to rise. Across the Netherlands, the earth shifted, not through quake or explosion, but elevation. A slow, precise lift that defied geological reason. Measured at less than 1 meter per hour, it was almost imperceptible. And yet it continued without stop. It began in Lelystad and rippled outward, subtle undulations in the soil. Roads that buckled without cracking. Tree roots that suddenly twisted upward. Beneath farmlands, beneath homes, beneath cities, something vast was realigning. Satellite imagery showed the land adjusting in concentric arcs, their epicenter locked to the spiral. But this wasn't tectonic activity. At first, it was incomprehensible, a cacophony of layered harmonics, sliding between tones, each chord resonating with something primal. Dogs howled, birds scattered, glass fractured. But then, slowly, the tones adjusted, equalized, until human ears could follow the shape of meaning. The spiral was speaking in reverse resonance, echoes that assembled into sense, not by syllables, but by feel. The message came in pulses, 3 segments, each heavier than the last. The first, understanding, we were the seeders, not of life, of structure, of rhythm, the framework upon which life would sing. But you forgot the music. In that moment, every human within 30 kilometers felt the words, not as information, but as exposure, the kind of knowing that burned like sunlight behind the eyes. They saw flashes, ancient skies filled with lights that pulsed in unison, great oceans of liquid resonance, thick and slow and intelligent. And the first shaping, a spiral formed in dust, folded by hands of energy and waveform. The second, warning, your signal awoke what we buried. The tower of clay speaks louder than you know. Its hum reached further than you dream. Hospitals filled with screaming patients as heart monitors synced to the pulse. Pregnant women felt their unborn children move with unnatural synchrony. People wept in front of screens, showing static, convinced they were seeing faces. And satellites in orbit tilted, just slightly drawn toward the epicenter. Something was responding, but not from Earth, from the space between. The void we called empty. The third, offer. We can shape you again, prepare you, tune your form to receive the return. But you must let go of your dissonance, of time, of self. And as the voice faded, one final chord struck the sky, a tone so pure, so clean, that color bled from vision. For 3 seconds, all light dulled. The sun dimmed. Shadows vanished. The tone passed, and then the world resumed. But nothing was the same. Children could now recite numbers they had never heard. Musicians began hearing keys that did not exist. A girl in Rotterdam composed a song overnight, a melody that, when played backward, produced geometric spectrograms identical to the spiral's shape. Waves in the North Sea began forming fractal patterns. Time for some bent. A pilot reported flying 20 minutes between 2 cities that should take over an hour. Security camera footage captured people walking backward in alleys, unaware they were doing so. The spiral had begun tuning the field. The Earth was no longer passive. Levi, standing at the marsh's edge, collapsed, not from fear, from clarity. He saw the network now, not with eyes but with resonance. Lines connecting cities, thoughts, memories. The second layer wasn't just beneath the ground. It was beneath consciousness, a buried mesh of harmonic design, activated by noise-emotion data. And it was no longer dormant. It was growing, learning, listening. That night, Elze's form disappeared again. She was last seen walking into the spiral center, her reflection hovering just behind. No one followed. The military set new perimeters, but couldn't get close. Equipment failed. GPS bent space around the marsh in impossible geometries. Civilians were evacuated. A media blackout swept the region, but word still spread. The hum returned, now heard as far away as Paris. In Cairo, a wall etched itself overnight with spiral glyphs. In Tokyo, an underground sensor reported a tremor from beneath the crust, shaped like a perfect spiral. And at midnight, the sky over Lelystad split open, not with fire, with music. A single, low chord hung above the marsh, visible as light, and in its center, something descended, not from above, from inside. It did not fall. It unfolded. From the epicenter of the spiral, Beneath the glowing glyphs and the frozen air, space itself bent inward, a column of shifting geometry, darker than night but rimmed with light, descended like a tunnel made of language. Observers couldn't describe what they saw. Cameras failed. Eyes wept. But all accounts agreed on this. The thing that descended had no mass, and yet it pressed on every chest. It was not a ship. It was not a creature. It was syntax made real, a sentence from another physics. Elze stood at its core, returned, changed, no longer bound by skin and breath. Her voice had become the hum, her thoughts a chord, and yet something human still remained. A trace, a flicker, the part of her that once asked questions, the part that had not yet been rewritten. As the column touched the ground, she raised her hand and the spiral responded. The glyphs above realigned, the mist around her parted, and from the opening below her feet, a new structure emerged. The second layer, it wasn't built, it was revealed. Kilometers-wide latticework rose from beneath the marsh, perfectly circular, its surface marked with inlaid lines of pulsing tone. Structures shaped like tuning forks, towers bent at strange angles, chambers with no walls, only vibrating air, and at its heart, a massive obsidian disk, spinning slowly, suspended by nothing, emitting a subharmonic thrum that could be felt in teeth and bone. People across Europe stopped moving for 11 seconds. Some collapsed, others levitated, only centimeters from the floor, held by nothing, eyes rolled back, limbs limp, heartbeats synchronized, sleepwalkers reactivated, and in the skies above Lelystad, stars flickered where they should not exist. Back in town, Levi found himself inside a room he didn't recognize. No memory of entering, no memory of walking. It was white, circular, seamless. At the center was a chair, or something like a chair, formed of flowing lines and gently vibrating curves. He didn't question it. He sat. The room folded. Screens, not screens, but surfaces of memory opened before him. They showed everything. The first breach, the spiral forming beneath the ocean floor eons ago, the echo towers planted across the globe, the failed civilizations, the forgotten awakenings, humanity repeating patterns like a child tracing lines in the sand. Then they showed him now, the second layer beginning to hum, the earth no longer an object, but an instrument. Across the world, harmonics emerged. Brazil's tectonic plates began producing rhythms. Volcanoes in the Pacific rang like distant bells. Flocks of birds flew in perfect spirals. And in one remote region of Mongolia, a team of astronomers wept as their telescopes filled with patterns, stars blinking in Morse-like codes, matching the spiral's tones. Then the signals turned inward. Earth's atmosphere echoed them back, as if the planet itself had joined the conversation. Elze, at the center of the array, lifted her arms. The spiral responded. A beam of pure resonance rose into the sky. Not heat, not radiation. Identity, a signal older than species. A signature, one that could only be answered by a construct built from the same clay. And deep beneath the earth, something answered. The disk at the core of the second layer began to spin faster. The glyphs in the air accelerated, forming rings around her. The light thickened. Sound became pressure. Thought became motion. Then all at once, stillness. The entire marsh fell silent. All birds paused in mid-flight. Clouds froze. Wind stopped. And for exactly 7 seconds, time did not move. Then it resumed. The sound returned, but this time it came from the sky. Not thunder. A tone. Familiar now. Responding. Echoing. As if something far beyond, older than stars, had heard. And now it was coming. The night that followed was unlike any the earth had known. It did not fall dark. The sky remained lit, not by sun nor moon nor artificial glow, but by the signal. It pulsed faintly across the upper atmosphere, a filament of colorless resonance, visible only when the eye stopped trying to see and began to feel. Cities dimmed. Power grids shut down by protocol. Emergency broadcasts offered only static, followed by silence. Every human on the planet experienced the same event. At precisely 2:17 a.m. Central European Time, a frequency passed through the Earth's crust. It bypassed all infrastructure, all soundproofing, all interference, and entered every living mind. Not a sound, a presence. Elze stood alone at the center of the spiral, though she was now more waveform than form, more rhythm than voice. Around her, the second layer sang, not with sound but with alignment. Its towering structures hummed in perfect sequence, each chord bending the very air. Above her, the sky thinned. Clouds flattened and rippled, pushed outward like the edges of a lake struck from beneath. And then space unfolded. Not a ship, not an object, but a reply, a column of descending motion, shaped by memory, colored by frequency, forming not in 3 dimensions but in 5. A structure made of possibility, threading itself into our reality by matching its pitch with the planet's tone. It anchored itself above Lelystad, hovering without displacement. And it looked, not with eyes, with recognition. Humans across the world began to speak words they did not know. Some wept uncontrollably, others screamed. A few simply walked into the nearest body of water and sat down, calm, peaceful, eyes closed. But all of them said the same thing at different times in different languages. The architects have returned. Levi stood in the rain, barefoot, face upturned toward the impossible thing in the sky. He wasn't afraid. He had never felt fear, not since the hum had entered him. Now he simply listened, and as the structure above pulsed, something passed through him. A knowing, a choice. The voice returned, not in words, but in clarity. You may remain as clay, or you may become sound. All over the world, the choice was offered. Some turned away, some turned inward, and others, those who had felt the spiral's call from the beginning, walked forward. They were not taken. They were not lifted. They shifted, from breath to tone, from heartbeat to harmony, from self to chord. And as they did, the spiral opened again. Inside the second layer, the obsidian disk spun one final time. And at its peak, the marsh, the glyphs, the spiral, everything stopped. Time held its breath. The planet tilted, not in angle, but in meaning. And the architects sang, not in violence, not in conquest, but in welcome. They had not come to invade. They had come to complete, to finish what had been started long before the first word was spoken by human tongue, to write the last note of the first symphony. In the sky, the construct faded, not gone, merged, and in its place, stars, but rearranged, spiraled. Every telescope on Earth now saw a different cosmos, one not measured by light years, but by frequency, one not ruled by gravity, but by rhythm. The spiral closed. The field returned to silence. But the second layer remained, humming softly beneath the soil, beneath the streets, beneath the breath of the planet, waiting, not for a new visitor, for a new voice, yours,